Well, welcome, divas and dudes. It's so great to have you here at Powerhouse Bakery. This spring is full of interest and intrigue, and I wanted to switch our gears to meal prep. And our gardens are hopefully planted, and they're starting to sprout some color. And so what I want to go over in the next 2 meetings is meal prep in minutes, and how do we really set up our kitchen? How do we have our grocery list set so that it's easy to mix and match and prepare, so that it's seamless and you don't have to struggle with all the ingredients of a recipe. What I really want us to learn is, how do we use our best foods list and just transform it into a wonderful meal that's full of color and full of nutrition, and of course, things out of our fridge. So the first thing I want to really do is look at our basic ingredients. So when we think of, how do we want to start a meal? What are the kinds of things you first think about? You might think of, well, I need the protein, I need the carbohydrate, and I need, some kind of veggie, right? We might think of that as us women. We might think, well, what am I going to have for this part? And I need to have my veggie. And of course, if we're going to really splurge, I guess we might say, well, maybe we'll have a sweet potato, or maybe a baked potato, or some rice. Well, I really want to make sure that we get all of these things covered. And how do we start to kind of think through what will our shopping trip look like, so that we have the basics, and it's really easy to get a variety of things together from those basics. I've said before, we don't always have to have a meat. So what would be some examples of some meats, and then even some meat options? Anybody want to come up with one? A meat or a meat option?
Fish?
Yes. For sure. And of course, we know, and nobody wants to say it, so beef is a popular one. We use it here at Powerhouse Bakery. We use it very sparingly, but we do. And so when we're putting our shopping list together for the week, we usually think of, maybe 2 different protein foods. And then can we think of any other carbs that almost kind of do this? They could count as both. Well, quinoa, sure. What would be another one? Beans, absolutely. And of course, lentils and root vegetables. And then, okay, now we're getting around the loop here. All the way up here are leafy greens. What root vegetables am I talking about? Give me some detail. Yeah. Sweet potato. What was that other one? Lately, a couple of my favorites have been rutabaga and turnips. I went to my mother-in-law's for Easter, and I surprised the bejeebers out of her because I brought this beautifully colored mix of roots. It had rutabaga and turnips and carrots and purple potatoes. It was so pretty. And she's 86, and so she said, well, I don't normally eat those. But she did eat them. Oh, yes. Thank you. So we can't leave those out. We've got beets of all colors. We've got rutabaga. And, of course, we've got, it's interesting because if you have never seen rutabaga and turnip, sometimes they look similar. And I actually hate to do this, but I'm going to give a shout out to Walmart. It was even hard for me to say. But but they had beautiful rutabaga and turnips. They were pre-bagged. They were nice and small. They were in really good shape. And the only reason I shopped there was because H-E-B was closed. But I was so impressed. And here's the trick. So turnips have an extra little color on them. Anybody know what color that is on there? Purple. They're so pretty. So they're bright white, creamy white, and purple. The rutabaga is, again, kind of shaped like a carrot, unless you get one that's way too big, and just don't even pick it up. Just leave it on the shelf. But they are more of a beige color, and they've got roots a little bit on them, and they're just fabulous. But these are loaded with so many of the nutrients in this carbohydrate and veggie family. And of course, they do even have a little bit of the protein. So I love that. So when you're doing your shopping list, which we're going to do that in just a quick second, I want us to think through what would be the variety of things we want to pick up. Any of you join me on the HEB store tour? Yeah, I see some of you said yay, because we kind of did that. You know, I want us to kind of think through when we go to HEB, what section do we start in? Do you start in the other side of produce and touch produce last, or do you go to produce first? You guys go to produce first? Yeah, I kind of do too, and then I have to move things around if I end up getting goods, right? But, you know, most of our weekly shopping trips should be a lot of this. And it's okay to have a little bit of the proteins too. You know, make everybody happy in our family groups. And then we hit the leafy greens. So walk me through, what kind of leafy greens might you have on your typical grocery list? Yes. Oh, I love it. Chard, spinach, collards. Okay, I want to hear how you do collards. Did you say it?
I did.
What did you say? Maria, what do you do for making collards?
Okay, so what I do is I cut it up small pieces, and I saute them in a little bit of avocado oil.
Ooh, okay.
And that's it, and a little bit of salt and pepper at the
Ooh.
end.
Okay, real quick, switcheroo. Hopefully I erased already. Yes, I did. I love that because collards are also one of those that we don't normally do. So here's a quick commercial break. Collard greens, how do we cook them? We cut up, we saute. And how long do you saute, Maria?
Oh, until they're a nice green.
Okay, so you're going to look for bright green? Because I thought maybe they turn kind of olive green, no?
No, I like the bright green.
Yes.
And since you're chopping it up small, like I actually take scissors and cut it.
Oh, cool.
And so when you're doing that in small pieces, you can keep that bright green and make sure that it's palatable, like it's not like it's raw.
So she's saying, cut them up in small pieces, even use kitchen scissors. If you don't have some of those, get them. I don't know if anybody hit you up from Cutco, but they got some scissors, right? Everybody's sold Cutco probably. But I love the idea. So cut it up, small pieces, avocado oil, or what would be some other examples of oils? Olive. What else? You could do walnut. Yeah, sunflower. Yeah, for sure. I like rapeseed. Of course, I love olive oil. And again, another segue, I had a client saying, should I take some more olive oil because it's good for me to reduce my cholesterol? What do you think I said? Yes. No. Don't take more avocado oil or olive oil. That would be too much of a good thing. So use it as your fats, but don't add it. We had a problem with coconut oil. For a while, it was touted as this really healthy oil. And what did people do? They started taking tablespoons at a time, thinking that it was going to, be healthy. And they go back to their doctor and their blood fats are shooting up. And they said, well, wait a minute, I thought it was healthy. It is healthy, but don't overdo it. So any oil that you use when you're cooking is great. So whether it be olive oil, and make sure you have a couple of oils on your grocery list. So when I flip back around, make sure. And avocado is really nice. My personal opinion is because avocado are so good as the fruit, I would be more inclined to use olive oil and save my pennies for the fresh avocado. But that's just personal. There's so many good ones. So avocado is definitely a way to go. And rapeseed is another one. This is really nice when you want to have very little flavor. Rapeseed is very mild. So if you don't like the flavor of olive oil and you don't have, avocado, because that one's very mild also, rapeseed's great. So whenever I'm doing baking, I use rapeseed.
I use sesame oil because it has a sweeter taste.
Yeah.
And nutty taste. So the collard greens are a little bit bitter.
They can be.
I put it with onions and garlic.
Yeah, so the sesame oil is a great point. Now you're infusing a flavor rather than trying to keep the flavor neutral. And I loved your point. You're right, Seema, because we want to make sure that, we have a purposeful addition of that flavor. So again, Maria, help me one more time. How long should we saute to keep the bright green? Any idea?
Well,
5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20?
Yeah, not 20.
Right.
Definitely not.
Right.
I would do about maybe 10 minutes.
10.
'Cause I'm cutting these pretty small. It's nice,
Yeah.
That green.
10-minute saute. Good, I love it. And then how do you season collards? Salt?
I just use a little bit of sea salt and or Himalayan salt.
Yeah.
Salt.
So not too much flavor. So sometimes people, and Seema, I want to get your thoughts. Sometimes people will add a flavor in to neutralize some of the strong collards.
Right.
You want to jump in on that?
Sure, so I would use sesame oil, make it a little bit warm, and then add a pinch full of cumin seeds.
Cumin seeds?
And
Ooh.
roughly chopped onions. And once it's kind of soft, I add lots of garlic. I stay away from ginger because it can make it bitter.
And I like how you use cumin seeds. Did you guys catch that? Cumin
It has to
seeds.
turn brown, so it will infuse color. So once all that is cooked, I add the collard greens until it wilts. So in the juices, it will wilt.
Yeah.
And then either I would puree it, and then I would add a handful of black chickpeas or garbanzo.
So you're making your meal right now. Your chickpeas. Ooh, I love it.
I use black chickpeas because it's more smaller and dense, so the flavor is more intense.
So what I love is that here we've got a basic green, and now see how it kind of trails? And we're thinking about all the things that Seema has in her pantry that she has as her basic ingredients. And so what's so cool is when you start thinking about how we're going to make a meal, and we see collard greens and we get excited because we just heard about this recipe, and we get them home, and then we think, okay, shoot, what am I going to do with these? Right? That happens. And then they stay in our fridge and, oh, they wilt and we feel terrible because we didn't know what to do with them. So what I want us to think about is as we're pulling things together, and I love how Seema and Maria told us about ways that they start it and then they take it all the way to a completion. Last week I cooked collard greens. I have a wonderful client that's a young guy, he's vegan, and I wanted to cook collard greens. So I did close to what you recommended because I love the bright green too. And then I added them as a layer in a dish. Again, because I felt like what Seema said, she wanted to add more flavors. So the good news is once we start building our pantry, I want us to be able to experiment, add some different flavors, and start to really have fun with ways that we can mix and match ingredients. So don't feel like you have to follow an exact recipe. And if any of you have been in my cooking classes, you know that the first thing I try to teach is build that intuition and that confidence to work with flavors and balance. And collards are just a perfect example because it is really on the far end of the spectrum of bitter. And part of it is our palate has to get used to this whole family, right? The whole family of leafy greens. What's a more mild green that we might start our family off with? Say if they're new to all this and they're kind of scared of, those leafy greens, what might we start with? Green beans, sure, that's an easy one. And romaine, yeah, and baby spinach. Because, all of those are a lot more neutral flavors. But when we start adding fats and we start adding other stronger flavors, it starts to balance it out so great. And so start them with something mild and get them used to seeing it. Because when we do our shopping list, we know we always want to have some of those bright greens on there. So when we're looking for our basic ingredients, we know we're going to get some proteins. And so, this week maybe we're going to do beef and fish. And now we want to go to the produce section. And we're going to get, so let's think of it as a week together. We're going to kind of just do our shopping list together. We're going to get some collard greens. And what else should we get? Spinach. And I love Rachel's idea of green beans. So my suggestion is that we start with a couple of fresh. And now let's venture into the frozen section for later in the week. So we've got 2 or 3 I mean, we even know the green beans could last how many days in our fridge? Several, right? I mean, maybe even the whole week. And broccoli, yeah. Let's do this, Rachel. Let's do frozen broccoli. I love the frozen broccoli florets. And what's so nice, you're going to love this. What's so nice is when you have these and they're already trimmed and it's just the floret, it is so easy to just throw that into a dish right away. In fact, we make a layered dish called a broccoli cheddar bake. And it's cooked chicken, broccoli right out of the freezer, and cheese on top. We put the lid on and we put it away for later. When we come home from work, we're hungry, ready to go, we take it out of the fridge, microwave it. We didn't do one thing to that broccoli except take it out of the bag when it was frozen. Now, I've just given away one of my secrets, and you're probably never going to get broccoli cheddar bake from us again, which I'm glad, because it's so easy and so convenient. Now, when we get to the meats, though, one thing I do want to emphasize is try not to get pre-seasoned meats. No on rotisserie chicken. No on pre-seasoned any meats. Why do you think I say that?
You don't know what they're putting in.
Yes! Thank you, Michelle. Yes. So fresh, please. It's so easy to add your own flavors. And I know it's tempting because the rotisserie smells good, right? It's like, well, it's still chicken, right? It'll be okay. I implore you, don't use it. Because not only do they put all kinds of stuff in it, they are not picking a healthy chicken for you. They're picking whatever chicken because their goal is to make profit off of you and tempt you with good smells and sights of that yummy chicken. So try not to. Okay, so we've got our beef and fish, and we've got our produce, so collard, spinach, green beans, and some frozen broccoli florets. Now let's go to the center aisles. So you know how some nutritionists will say, oh, just shop the perimeter, don't go in the center. Why do you think they say that?
Healthy stuff.
Cheaper, healthier, maybe, but I venture to say I can say no to both of those, because what I find in the center is beans and rice, super cheap, super healthy, and as long as we don't pick the ones that are pre-mixed, pre-seasoned, we've got the healthiest stuff on earth. So let's go to the center of the aisle, and we're going to get our quinoa. I know somebody mentioned that when we were talking about our base ingredients. So we always want to have quinoa in the house, for sure. Do we want to get the white quinoa, or should we get tricolor? Yeah, let's get tricolor. ×3 color. For sure. Now, should we get canned beans, or should we get dried beans? Dried? Okay. And I'm going to say you don't have to. If you want to do dried beans, you can. But don't be afraid of canned, because you know what's going to happen? You're going to come home and want something quick, and you're going to look at those dried beans and go, oh, forget it. Right? I know how we all think. So don't be afraid of the canned. Even if you get ones that are salted. I mean, let's face it. If you do the dried beans, are you going to salt them? Heck yeah. Anybody that tastes pinto beans unsalted will never taste them again, right? You're like, oof, not so good. So get them canned. What I would recommend is don't get the ones that have a lot of sugars added. So the baked beans, the ranch beans, all of those are not so good. Doesn't mean you couldn't season them up similarly at home. But it's really much better if you get the ones that are just salted. I mean, yeah, you could spend a little extra and get organic, especially if you know you're going to use beans a lot. So canned is good.
Is there any concern for like extra ingredients in the can?
There isn't too many. Usually it's salt. That's the preservative. You know, there might be something else in there, but stick with the good brands. And I mean, of course, I don't work for H-E-B anymore, but I got to hand it to them. You know, they've got a lot of great things. And the H-E-B brand of beans is what we use here. I do get the Central Market Organics for garbanzos and red beans, like the kidney beans. I just think they are lovely. And kind of my mentality is when we think of organics, I feel like it's probably a good idea to at least get 50% of your cart being organic. So again, when we're putting together our basic ingredients where we want to be able to have meal prep and have things that we can just grab, feel good about, put together quick and easy, I think it's worth it, because you're going to be much more likely to grab a can of organic black beans, add it to a bowl, and whip stuff up than if you had dried beans that you tried to go so full into, scratch made that we throw up our arms and go to fast food. Heaven forbid. Yeah, you can drain them, of course. You could even rinse them if you wanted. But you know what? Sometimes it's good to have that liquid. Like when we make our turkey chili, we do not drain the beans. And again, we're using a really good quality bean. There's only salt added, and then we are adding lots of other things. So I think it's worth it. So we're going to get some quinoa. We're going to get some kind of beans. Again, we're going to probably get maybe one more thing from the center aisle. Do you want to get rice, or do you want to get maybe some pasta? What sounds better? Or lentils? Pasta? Okay, let's do pasta. I like that because it's going to work with my next idea. So now we're going to think of beef and fish. We've got greens. We've got broccoli. We've got a couple of different complex carbs. And now we're going to be able to start creating some meals. Before we do start mixing and matching, what kind of spices do we have in our spice rack? What can we... Garlic, salt, pepper. Yes, yes. I'm going to move this. Ooh, now we're talking. So what I love hearing is that we have some single spices. So don't forget the spices. We've got cumin, I heard. Of course, salt. Let's talk about pepper for a minute, because I do not like the pepper that comes in a little can that you turn the dial and it gets 3 holes and you shake it. You know what I'm talking about? What pepper is like wow pepper? Peppermint. Yeah. And if you're here for our spices from around the world, black pepper is the king of antioxidants, right? Black pepper is the king of so many of those phytochemicals. So no longer are we going to get McCormick shaken sneeze pepper. Fresh ground. Now you can get really fancy with the different peppers. You can have a pepper mill that you have lots of different types of peppers. You've got reds and oranges. And don't laugh, but one time I saw a bag of pepper for sale. It was like $15. And I was so curious, how could pepper be that expensive? I had to buy it. I just had to know what's going to be so good about the pepper. And it was quite good. I mean, there's an aroma, there's a smokiness, a sweet, hot. There's layers of nuance in pepper that you will never understand if you just do shake and sneeze. It's just a totally different process. And so experiment with it. In fact, I recommend you have 2 grinders in your kitchen. One that has maybe a classic, and then the other one that has some other fancy ones. Because when you grind it on some pasta or some rice or even some zucchini as you've grilled it, it's so pretty. And we know that the eyes eat first. And if that pepper just pops, whenever I'm doing food photography, I want to do that last little bit of fresh ground pepper, and it just makes you salivate because you know it's going to be so good. So definitely have some fun with pepper. And really, we could even back it up and think the same way with salt. Is Himalayan salt better for you than sea salt? Trick question.
It's the same sodium content, maybe a little bit more minerals and a different earthy taste.
Yeah, probably a little bit more earthy taste.
So some people may not like it.
Sometimes, but really what happens is our eyes see it and it's beautiful and it's fun to work with. So of course it tastes better, right? And it might have some minerals in it, because we know that minerals usually are the vehicle of color in nature. So it certainly stands to reason, which is I think why it's kind of become so popular. But we also iodized salt, back in the 40s, I think, for a reason, because people were not getting enough seafood. People that lived way inland didn't have enough access to iodine, and it was a problem. So I'm not convinced that it's worth it for us to never have iodized salt. I'm just not sure of that. So I'd like to suggest that we do both. Personally, here at the bakery, when we bake, we use the iodized salt. When we're doing savory dishes and we're really working the layers of flavor and the beauty of the ingredients, then I would use a colored salt. Sound good?
But the salt dissolves, so you won't even see the color, right?
Well, you kind of do. So if you have not had a little bowl of beautiful Himalayan salt on your table and you grab some and you pinch it and you put it on, it's just fun.
Yeah, I do have a Himalayan salt. I'm saying when I do that thing, it just dissolves.
Yeah, it kind of is, but it is a larger granule. So even when you think of the kosher salt, that's not a different salt. It's just larger. And so it tastes better because your taste buds are getting a bigger wallop of salt. It's kind of the same idea with the Himalayan. It's really the size, maybe the color, if nothing else, when you're grabbing it and sprinkling it, because it's just pretty. When you have your beautiful pepper or salt grinder and it's got those pink crystals in there, that's when you're seeing it. So you're right. It's not a big color change, but it can be. I have seen sometimes the pink color pop when they have fresh asparagus and you get a little glistening of that pink. Yeah.
So kosher salt, do you recommend or just?
Not really. I mean, if I'm going to go with a larger granule, I probably are going to go ahead and do the Himalayan. I'm just not used to kosher salt. Restaurants use it a lot because, again, it's a larger granule. It's really nice when you're trying to press it into the muscle meats, or you're trying to press it into grilled vegetables. It just holds better. And you get a nice balance, kind of, we call them bumps and grooves. You get a bump of salt and you get a groove of soft. If you did the same flavor style with finely ground salt, you'd get all salt. You'd get a valley of salt.
I was going to say, I use kosher salt to wash the collards.
Oh.
Before cooking them, because the collards have some dirt in them, right? And the collards kind of like washes it.
Wow. That's so interesting. So that reminds me, washing your collards with salt reminds me of when we did our fish dish. You remember the arancini? Oh, no, I'm sorry. That wasn't the arancini. The one that was the cod and it came to us. Bacala. Did I say that right? Bacala. Thank you, Maria. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Yeah, so it's fully loaded. It's packed with salt. And you have to keep rinsing it and soaking it and rinsing it. And so it's a way of preserving it, keeping it clean, and seasoning it. So, I'm so glad you brought that up. So, of course, we can do your, ho-hum salt and pepper, and then we can do your wowza salt and pepper. So I want us to always do the wowza salt and pepper. And then I want us to start playing with different types of spices. I'm so glad that Seema mentioned seeds. In a minute here, I'm going to pull out my base ingredients, and I'm going to show you how to make one of my favorite base foods. But I use seeds and I use leaves. So you're going to see bay leaves as one of my absolute favorite flavors for so much. Bay leaves go beautifully in beans, legumes, grains, meats, stews. Anybody have a bad experience? And spaghetti sauce, right? Anything with tomato, yes. And so where a recipe says put it in a bay leaf, I'm like, oh, no, not just one. Let's do 4. That's just because I love that flavor. And so when you're experimenting and deciding what palette do you want to dress up your foods with, this is so important. Finding what you love, because you can have a ho-hum can of beans and then you can have a wow can of beans, all with what you put on it. So cumin seeds, if you have never tried, I say they're different than ground cumin. Again, think of the peaks and valleys of the salt. When you have a coarse ground salt, you get a bigger punch, and then your taste buds get a rest, and then another punch. And so that's kind of how the taste buds work. When you're having seeds, the same idea. You don't notice it as much on the palate until your tooth cracks down into one of those seeds, and you get an explosion of flavor. And I love that about seeds. Another one of my absolute favorites is fennel. I also love dill. These are all seeds.
Mustard.
And mustard seeds, yes.
Mustard, coriander, and nigella.
Explain to us what nigella is.
Nigella is when in a dish you don't want to use onions, you can use nigella seeds and oil to compensate for the lack of onion taste. So I would use nigella seeds with carrots.
Okay. How do you spell it?
Nigella.
Nigella. So that would be similar to an onion flavor.
Yeah, I can bring some next time.
Yeah. So what's fun is now we're starting to see families of flavors. When we think of fennel, that's in the family of other sweet spices. Can you think of one that's similar?
Anise.
Yeah, anise. Even star anise. So now we start kind of blooming into the sweet arena. Coriander is a great bridge because it's softer, but it still kind of wants to dance and play with the sweets. So I love how these just have this cacophony of flavors. And when you start playing with the ones that you like, first you smell it. If it gets you intrigued, now you might even taste it. And then decide, how do I want to play? If you don't like the smell, chances are you will not like the flavor. Can you think of any example? Yes, ma'am.
So is the anise and the star anise?
They're different. They are. They're cousins. You know, they're similar, but they are different. When we do the spices from around the world, I'll bring them all out and we'll just play with them again. We'll do that again in the summer. But in this state, if you can go to a place where you can smell and open, so I know Whole Foods and help me see, I think even some of the international markets have an open where you can smell them. Maybe now with COVID, they don't let you do that anymore. But it's so fun to be able to smell before you buy. But even if you can't smell, just get a small amount. If you can buy them from a place that you're pretty sure there's a high turnover. Because if you're buying them already ground, chances are 50 to 60 to 70% of all their aromatics have since dissipated. So we really don't want to buy them if we can't get them really fresh. But if you haven't used dill before, my Chicken Joe has dill in it. And I got the idea of this recipe, the Joe Spice recipe, because when my friend made Chicken Joe for me the first time, I just loved this peppery flavor. So I looked at the peppercini ingredient list and I figured out all these things that were in there, and I wanted to break them apart to see how I could heighten the flavors that I really liked in that dish. And that's how I came up with adding dill to my Joe Spice, which is now a dry spice based on some of the flavors of the ingredients in that recipe. So it's really fun just to start thinking about what flavors do I want to play with, because on a Tuesday evening when you get home and you want to open your pantry, decide what am I going to make, you want these flavors to get you invigorated, excited about what am I going to make. Okay, so now we got our spices covered. So one other thing, so we talked about the dry spices. Let's talk a little bit about some of the produce. We're going to hop back to the produce section just quickly because we can't go too far without getting some onions, or maybe some shallots, or maybe some garlic cloves. What kinds of things would we like to have on our base ingredient list for this week?
Garlic.
Yes. So we're going to call this fresh spices. A little different than the seeds, although, similar idea. So, of course, garlic. Ginger, yes. Shallots. Anybody use shallots before? Yeah. Describe it to me. How would you do shallots?
Oh, God. You put me on the spot.
Okay, I don't mean to do that, Fitz. No worries. It looks kind of like an enlarged garlic clove. It's got the papery skin around it. And so you, of course, take that part off. You can press it like you do a garlic clove, and I'll show you all that in a minute. But shallots are so nice because they tend to be quirky personalities. You can sometimes get one that's spicy hot and others that are very soft. So you kind of have to be prepared to adjust your recipe based on what personality you got. Kind of like, Michelle, when you made the dish last week, the raspberry crumble, the berry crisp, and you said it was way too lemony. Whether or not you zested too much, or it was just a lemon that wanted to give away a whole lot of juice, don't be afraid to adjust a recipe. So know how to look at what you have and be able to adjust accordingly. So always using your eyes, your nose, and even your mouth taste before you go all the way to the completion of the recipe, because then you can usually adjust and save it rather than giving it to your family and it not being exactly what you wanted.
You know what I did to the stuff? I didn't eat it very crisp.
Oh.
I gave it to my 2 dogs. They loved it. Dessert!
Wow, but I'm
It's
sad.
healthy, you know?
A healthy dessert for your pup, yes.
Here.
They are lucky pups for sure. So here we've got roots, beautiful fresh spices of roots. Of course, we didn't mention it, but I know we were thinking it, onion. What about some fresh spices that aren't roots? What other ones should we? Yes, good. What else?
Herbs,
Yeah, what about scallions?
scallions, rosemary,
Sure.
cilantro.
So we'll put it into all herbs. Scallions I love, and then sometimes even arugula can be a great spice. If you've ever had our real deal, which is when we call it like the real deal, spaghetti and meatballs. But we don't stop there because we really want to add more nutrients. So we have the noodles and we get a big handful of arugula and we mix it in with the tomato sauce, which is very non-traditional. You see all those green things in your plate, but it's surprisingly nice to get that peppery nuance with the tomato. And so, I know my staff, when they first read that recipe and did what I told them, they thought, are you kidding? But they liked it. Another weird one was adding mint and basil and arugula mixed in with spaghetti squash and serving it as a hot dish with meatballs. They're like, dang, that's not right, Suzanne. Are you sure? And now it's like one of the most popular dishes because it's kind of a surprise. It's got all these flavors that are dancing in the palate. Because what do we think of with mint? Mint is fresh. And, we don't think of it as being in a savory dish, right? I even put it in our eggs and greens frittata. And people think that is weird. I'm not eating that. And then if they, get up the guts and try it, they realize it's actually quite good to mix mint with eggs. Same thing with basil. Basil's not so much of a stretch, but I know the mint was, and even the arugula. And so the last eggs and greens frittata I made, actually for my family, was of almost a full bag of arugula, as much as I could fit into my 9x3 pan. And it had another big handfuls of cilantro. So I did olive oil in the pan. I did as much greens as I possibly could get. My 9x13 is about this tall. It had that much veggies. And then I poured the egg on just to hold it all together. A little bit of cheese on top just to make it look pretty with the tomato slices. And so gone are the days at Powerhouse Bakery and at Ryman House that we do a sprinkle of herbs. We do a dollop of herbs. And so sky's the limit. Don't hold back and just experiment with how far can I take this, and
Substitute for arugula is watercress.
yes, watercress. Now describe that flavor for me because I don't know that one very good.
Mild and peppery and goes well with just a little bit of lemon.
Yes.
Citrusy, yeah.
Ooh, I get it. So watercress with lemon, so citrus, and you said it's a mild flavor.
Some pepper, and then you just mix it with tomatoes or something. I mean,
So you would serve it as a salad.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't cook it.
You can cook it with eggs.
So kind of like the arugula,
Yeah,
where
instead
it's
of arugula.
gotcha. Oh, how
It's
fun.
much more milder than arugula, and it has a burst of peppery taste.
Yes. Okay, I like that. So it's more mild. So when we do our survey around the grocery store, we want to have our meat because we still want to think of the center of the plate. So whether it's a muscle meat or it's a fish or it's a plant-based protein, in our mind that's going to be it. And we want to have maybe 4 or 5 choices for the week, and then we want to have 4 or 5 choices that will be our carbohydrate, and then we want to think of a way to spice them up, and then we want to think of a way to cook extra so we can have leftovers. And as much as you love pasta, Rachel, and spaghetti sauce, it's a great example that when you cook things like this, they get so much better when they sit around for a little while. Quinoa is a great example of that too. So cooking it ahead of time, letting it cool down, adding some shallots and maybe even some celery. We didn't write that up here. Maybe some fresh lemon and some arugula. We didn't even talk about this, but we should have. Nuts and seeds. If you have nuts and seeds on your shelf, they're so easy to toss in. And now you have all these different ways to dress up your base ingredients. And so in the next couple of weeks, we're going to play with some of these ingredients. And so today I want to show you how to make one of my favorites. And again, it's going to take a little production time, but then it stays in your fridge. It is so versatile because you can do lots of different dishes with the base. It's called sofrito. Anybody ever make sofrito? Maria? I bet you have in your Italian cooking world. So sofrito is one that I debuted on SA Live many years ago when I was making a big paella. Anybody ever make paella? Yes! Okay, so sofrito, and it kind of reminds me of what we did in our Italian cooking. You know, that beautiful dish with the eggs and the peppers and the tomatoes when we had Brenda joining us. Sofrito is a mainstay at Powerhouse Bakery and at Ryman Kitchen because it's so versatile. So we first are going to start with Roma tomatoes. So write this down because this is going to be your recipe. Roma tomatoes and 3 bell peppers. I like to do one of each color. And about 5 cloves of garlic, more or less, so again, kind of depends on you. And then some spices. So again, it kind of depends on you.
How much Roma tomatoes?
12. So let's go with, we're going to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, for 12, here's kind of a mix. And I'm going to show you, it's about a teaspoon or 2 of different spices. So you're going to see I'm using coriander that I did grind up, but I bought it as whole seeds. So I'm going to say fresh ground. And then I'm going to use fennel seeds. So these are going to be whole. And what else did I have over there? Fennel, coriander, fresh parsley, and dill. So fresh and seeds. Okay, so 12 will give you plenty of sofrito to work with. And the first thing you'll do is big pot of water. Put your 12 Roma tomatoes into the water. And let it boil. The skins need to come off or at least get loose. Now I used to, my team and I used to peel them and it took a long time and I was like, holy cow, this takes forever. And then I realized, well, we're just going to blend it anyway. How about if we keep the skin? So again, that's up to you. But, I'm all about how to cut corners and still maximize flavor and texture. And so I'm very happy with the skins on. But again, some people like to take them off. And when you boil them, at least 20, I'd say 15 minutes, a soft rolling boil, they come off very easily. Drain them, let it cool. And then I chop up the bell peppers, one of each color, so red, yellow, green. And then garlic, and then spices. I did, it was at least 1 teaspoon of each, and then salt. 1 teaspoon or more. So again, this is kind of according to your taste. I promise you it will not be over seasoned if you do 1.5 or even 2 teaspoons. And then the parsley fresh, I would do 1/2 cup. And so then, after your tomatoes are processed, and you have in a large skillet your peppers and garlic, saute all that, get it cooked down a little bit, then you marry the 2 flavors together. Of course, I put bay leaves in here in the cooking water. See, I forget all these little touches. Bay leaves in the water, so 2 or 5. Marry the flavors together in your skillet. Not any olive oil at this point. You don't really need to add anything else. We're just preparing that first stage. And here, sometimes we'll freeze it. But at my house, normally what I do is make the whole batch, and then I start adding lots of different things throughout the week. with it. I can make a turkey chili. I can make a veggie chili. I can use it for a pasta sauce. I could add coconut whipping cream. I could add cashew cream and make it a creamy sauce. So those things I'm going to show you as we go through all of this. But the first thing is having a really good sofrito in your fridge is a fabulous way to start your week and really use a lot of the ingredients that you pick up on your first shopping trip.
So is that a dish?
It's a base. So we're talking base ingredients.
Okay.
Of course it could be.
Because I don't see any protein in it.
Right. It's a base ingredient. So it's the start of many dishes. So if I wanted to make the real deal, so pasta and meat sauce, I brown some meat with some garlic and I add a big scoop of sofrito and voila. If I wanted to make a vegan dish, I would leave out the meat. I would pull up some of my sofrito. I might add a little bit more fresh parsley. I might add some garbanzo beans. And now I've got this awesome homemade sauce that I did not have to spend hours making because I just did it once. And I could pull out little 2-pint bags from the freezer if I wanted. It does last pretty well in the fridge. You could always add other things like some lemon juice. You could add fresh thyme from your garden. One of my favorites is to add fresh wilted greens. So a little bit of spinach. I'm going to warm up in my skillet some spinach, and I'm going to add a scoop of sofrito to my skillet, warm it up, put it over some pasta, or just eat it plain. Or I could eat it with some eggs. So you see how, wow, this gives us so much. Yes. Oh, yes. Did I forget onions? See, I told you. If I don't give you the recipe and you keep me honest,
So
yes.
we make a master mix, which is exactly this: onion, garlic, tomatoes, peppers.
It's such a master
and
kit
then
list.
all
Sure.
the spices, and that's the base for everything else.
Yeah, there you go. And it's not
Exactly that.
obligatory to have onion. Many of the recipes don't add it, and sometimes it has onion and no peppers. So again, you get to mix, let it work with your palate. If you needed to, you could cheat and not even cook your own tomatoes. You could buy some of the really good quality Spanish whole tomatoes and not have to go through that step. So that works too.
Another shortcut I use is I just roast the combination of onion, tomatoes, peppers, and garlic in the oven for maybe 15-20 minutes, and then puree it.
Sure, there you go. I mean, that would definitely be a way to do it. It might not get quite as soft, but of course, and then you're getting that caramelization. Yeah, so having a base sauce means that it's so nice to not have to always use a jarred sauce that somebody else got to pick what the flavor profile would be. You get to do your own. Okay, so now we are going to show you the steps in this sofrito. So here we have all the fixins of the sofrito. And so I'm going to kind of show you all the different components. And I did a little bit of the chopping already, so you can see. Here we've got our 2 colors of peppers, and we do have onion. Here is some garlic. And like I said, 12 tomatoes is a good amount. I cooked it for probably 12 to 15 minutes, and then we just did the food processor. So I'm going to put that in my skillet, actually in my stock pot, and this is exactly what I would do at home. Yeah, just tomatoes. The ones that were boiled. And I added a bay leaf. So I'm just going to let that start to heat up. And at the same time, I'm going to saute my veggies. And Mary Jonas, would you get me a knife and a cutting board? Thank you so much. So you see here, the bay leaf, I'm going to put right back in. Notice how easy the peels come right off. So another way that you can do this is instead of processing, you can just chop. I actually love it that way. And then you get a little bit more of a chunk. So I think what I'll do here is I'll just show you, as soon as Mary brings me my cutting board, I'll show you what it looks like with just, some more texture. So again, you can go to the center of the aisle of your grocery store and get beautifully high quality canned or even a carton of tomato. Thank you so much. Okay, so what did you think? Could you tell which was which as far as the spices? Bay leaf, yes. Yeah? Okay, so there's different varieties for sure. There's a laurel, and then there's lots of different varieties of bay. My wonderful diva, Judy Davis, she passed away, so we lost her to heaven. But her husband still brings me bay leaves. And so I would love to have 2 varieties of bay leaves because they're just fabulous. And so, did you figure out what this one was?
There's a cumin seed and a dill and
This one is, this is the fennel. Fennel. And it's hard if you don't get to put it in your fingers. And I'm going to put these in my skillet in just a minute. And here, this one was a larger seed, and this is the dill. This one's dill. And this one is the ground coriander. And so this is what they look like in the large seeds. So I just love when I can buy them like this and keep them around, because this I could also put in the water and it gives flavored. If I didn't want to grind them up, you can just use the whole seed. And you can even eat the whole seeds for sure. So this is starting to boil now. If I wanted to go grab a rosemary sprig off my garden, I could do that. And when I use these whole tomatoes, just adding some chunk in there is a really nice way to just give it a little more texture. And now I've got my skillet warming up. I'm going to add a little bit of my seeds. So this is where I'm going to do the saute. I like to get them a little toasty. Just gives a little more flavor. Has anybody started using more seeds in their cooking? Yay! I love it, I love it. This one's ground, and that's fine too. Just gives it a little softer note. And here we go, we're gonna start adding in our goodies. So, the onion and the peppers. Again, this can be all done way ahead of time. And so next week, when you come again, we're gonna have several sauces and ingredients, and I'm going to show you many different dishes that we can do based on those base ingredients. When you do your peppers, one thing that I like to show is taking the seeds out. You can let these dry and use the seeds of the peppers, and it gives another extra little pop. And when I'm chopping my pepper, I first cut off the ends. So I've got these, and they're just easier to chop when they are separate. So stack them, turn them, and you get a nice even chop. And you don't have to make them very small. Again, the texture is always a nice thing. Now this one though, I can use lots of different ways. If I want to make beautiful strips or dainty little cubes, this one is much easier to manage. So there's my all colors. There's some recipes for sofrito that have you only use the green bell pepper. That was common in the paella recipes. They wanted that a little bit more bold flavor profile because it's going to cook down quite a bit, and they wanted the hot flavors. Okay, so there's my 3 colors. Now I'm going to wait till towards the end to put in my garlic. So 5 cloves of garlic. And I was telling my wonderful Amber that you're not supposed to use garlic when it's starting to sprout. Have you heard that? Yeah, in Italy it's bad luck. I said, well, I'm not Italian, so I guess I'm okay. But it's supposed to make it a little more bitter. So, I just couldn't bring myself to throw away the garlic. But if you store it in a dark place, it will be less likely to sprout. So I don't know. I know for potatoes it's really not good for you. So if a potato sprouts, yeah, just go ahead and throw that one away. Yeah, you can definitely do that. So I would let my peppers cook for about, probably 15 to 20 minutes. And I've got all those wonderful seeds in there. And again, I'm not going to chop it really fine because it's okay to have some chunks. So I just kind of did a rough chop on the garlic. It's really only important to have a tiny chop when the garlic is a standalone and you don't want it to be too much of a bite. But I honestly love to have a little more robust garlic flavor. So again, that's just kind of my preference. So we've got some chunks of the tomato. I could add a rosemary sprig if I wanted to here. And I've got all my beautiful peppers cooking. I've got the seeds. I haven't added any salt yet. I'll probably do that at the very end because in some dishes I might want to have less salt than others. So it's always good to really hold back on salt because you can't take it out once it's in. No oil. It's doing just fine with just all the moisture from the peppers. So again, I'm going to let that cook for about 15 to 20 minutes and I'm going to put the parsley in at the very end. Now I could also cook my tomatoes with whole parsley and then pull it out, and then of course if I wanted to just blenderize it together. So again, adding those layers of flavor everywhere you can is a great way to go. I do normally take out the stems because they don't cook down as well. But I do like a fairly good size of leaf. So notice I haven't chopped it really small. This one's got a little bit of a stem, so I'm going to pull that off. So normally I'd let it cook just a little bit longer and we'd have this beautiful combination of the roasted peppers or the sauté and then blend it together with the tomato base, and that is the start of our sofrito. So next week I'm going to show you lots of different ways to make recipes with this as a base. Okay? Thank you so much, ladies, for joining me today, and we'll see you next week.